Is an exam?
There is no exam.
Okay,
Contrary, yeah, they always schedule an exam, but you're free next week. This is the last meeting.
Shh, you're supposed to keep scaring them.
Okay, we're ready, Rob. All right, good afternoon, and welcome to Purdue University and the CERIAS Computer Security Seminar. Our speaker today is Dr. Marc Rogers, professor in computer technology here at Purdue and former CERIAS staff member. His topic today will be computer deviance and how understanding individuals who engage in these kind of activities can help lead to better digital investigation. So in this talk, he'll provide some up-to-date research on that topic and introduce a process model for digital investigation and analysis. Marc?
Thank you, Randy. Good afternoon. As indicated, we're going to talk a little bit about computer deviance, and I'll qualify things right up front. It's a little tricky way of really not using the old hackneyed term hackers or computer crime. We're going to really look at those characteristics or those individuals that would fall within that category, but we're going to make it a little bit broader. And again, relate it back to this whole concept of digital investigations, digital evidence, and really look at how do we repurpose something that, to be quite honest, has been fairly effective, maybe a little controversial, but fairly effective in regular investigative work, how we can repurpose that for the digital crime scene. I always like to start off with a little cartoon. I notice there's quite a few of my students in the class. They have probably seen this before on my door. Little, the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, and yes, it's kind of interesting that does look a little bit like Bill Gates.
Which one?
Oh, the very first one. I think the first one's actually Bill's dad. Isn't he a corporate lawyer? Little agenda. What is cyber forensics? We're going to set a little bit of the tone here. Now, obviously, some of the students in here are going to be familiar, but just to make sure we're all basically on the same wavelength, on the same page, before we jump into really the discussion. What is a cybercrime? And it might shock you to know that we might have some actual interesting, if not false, definitions of what is a cybercrime. So we'll look at that. Psychology of psychological crime scene analysis, relate it back to what we do in the real world, what we do in the physical world, and then look at how do we repurpose that to a digital crime scene. And then look at some investigative uses. With the investigative uses, I'll talk a little bit about some cases we've been working on where we've actually used this process and had some pretty good success. Obviously, I won't be able to get into any specifics, but it'll be kind of a redacted version of this. So what is cyber forensics? Cyber forensics is an emerging scientific discipline. I'm going to use the term emerging. It is relatively new, if you want to compare it to the other forensic sciences that have been around, like latent fingerprint analysis, since the 1800s. We've got about a 22 to 23-year history, which makes us a bit of a babe in the woods when it comes to the forensics field. Now, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and go out on a limb with the second bullet point. We have understanding that at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences meeting in San Antonio in 2007, we will have fulfilled the criteria to be recognized as a subdiscipline. Subdiscipline will actually be digital forensic sciences, and digital evidence, or what we refer to as cyber forensics, will be under that subclass. And that is a very important step. If you're looking at the way the courts determine whether something is credible or not, whether something really qualifies as scientific evidence, if you're not recognized by the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, for all intents and purposes, you don't exist in the eyes of the court. It then becomes a little bit of a rolling the dice to determine whether this is something that has a higher weight than other factual evidence. Like I mentioned, it falls under the umbrella of digital forensic science, DFS, which is actually broken down into two different subcategories. The first one being IT, or imaging technology, which is a funny term because really it's referring to multimedia. This includes audio and video. What we're going to talk about today, though, is the digital evidence portion, we call the DE. That includes the media analysis, network analysis, code analysis, and this is where this concept of cyber forensics fits in. If you've read any of the literature, or you've been online, or you've read any of the newspapers, you'll see there's a mixing of terms. Some people call it computer forensics. Some people call it cyber forensics. Some people refer to it as network forensics. For the purposes of this talk, we're really interested in the digital evidence. So the modality of the evidence is going to define what we're talking about. And in this case, it doesn't matter whether it's in transit, whether it's in storage. As long as it is digital in nature, this is what we're going to be focusing on. Cyber forensics then really deals with these following. It's the secure collection, the identification of suspect data, examination of this data, the presentation, and application, obviously, of a country's laws to computer practice. That really is kind of defines, in a nutshell, at a very high level, what this area is about. When we talk about cybercrime, we might have some misconceptions. Who here has ever watched that show, Mythbusters? Yeah, my son and I love that show. Well, let's do a little bit of myth busting here. The media talks about this concept of a computer crime. And they talk about computer crime like it's a distinct category that's separate from everything else. In fact, computer crimes constitute at least 3 broad categories. And actually, 2 of these categories are really not overly unique. You have computer-assisted. A computer-assisted crime is really where the computer is nothing more than a tool. Child pornography, fraud, other type of cases where really the computer is just used to reach out and more effectively touch somebody, make it easier to counterfeit, make it easier to commit an act that really doesn't have its genesis in technology. That becomes what we call a computer-assisted crime. And we have pretty good experience in dealing with, unfortunately, things like fraud and counterfeiting and child pornography and these other cases from the physical world. There's not a lot of new information that we need there. I'm going to talk about the third one second. Computer incidental. In this case, really, this is an artifact of of society's need and demand and reliance on technology. Who here in this room does not own a cell phone? There's always one in every crowd, right? Who here never uses email? Okay, you've just basically illustrated my point. We're all tied to technology, aren't we? Doesn't matter really what we do in life. We have these digital trails. Email. In fact, last metrics I saw is 36 billion pieces of email a day. That's a lot of email. If you look at businesses, 93% of the information that a business has is usually digital-based or is in digital form. They might print it to document, but for the most part, even businesses have gone to digital, to electronic documents now as opposed to the paper. They may make copies, but still, we live in a digital world. And because of that, evidence now related to just about any type of investigation is going to be digital in nature. In fact, the FBI indicates that now, and in the near future, they figure 80 to 90% of all investigations they do, which include a murder, something that really has nothing to do with a computer, will have digital evidence. Again, that's just an artifact that we are tied to the digital world. We use our bank cards. We use our credit cards. We email. We go into MySpace. We go to Facebook. We leave our calendars. We have these devices that are a cell phone, PDA, email calendar. We're aiming people. We're IMing people all over the place. This all becomes evidence that may or may not be related to something that's part of an investigation.